The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of the country club as my sister Madison's voice cut through the celebration like a blade. Maybe if you weren't such a broke loser, Jean, you could afford a decent dress to my engagement party. 200 guests turned to stare. The silence stretched like a taut wire. And in that moment, as humiliation burned my cheeks red, I had no idea that 24 hours later, a single envelope would change everything. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The sound of shattering crystal seemed to echo in slow motion as I stood frozen in the center of the Riverside Country Club's grand ballroom. Madison's words hung in the air like poison gas, seeping into every corner of the room where 200 of the city's elite had gathered to celebrate her engagement to Trevor Blackwood III. My sister stood 10 feet away, radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, her perfectly manicured hand resting on Trevor's arm. Her smile was surgical, precise, cold, designed to cut deep. The chandelier light caught the 3-carat diamond on her finger, sending sparkles across the room like tiny fireworks celebrating my humiliation. Madison. The voice belonged to our Aunt Patricia, sharp and warning. But Madison wasn't finished. I mean, seriously, she continued, her voice carrying that particular tone she'd perfected since childhood, the one that made everything sound like an observation rather than an attack. It's my engagement party. The least you could do is try to look like you belong here. Her eyes swept over my black dress, the one I'd bought on sale 3 months ago and had worn to every semi-formal event since. But I suppose when you're living paycheck to paycheck, options are limited. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. I could feel phone cameras turning toward me, capturing my moment of devastation for social media posterity. This would be trending by midnight. Engagement drama. Sister shame. Whatever cruel hashtag would stick. Trevor leaned down to whisper something in Madison's ear, probably telling her to ease up, but she waved him off with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Oh, don't worry about John. She's used to being the family disappointment. That's when something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like the first hairline fracture in a dam that's been holding back too much pressure for too long. I bent down and began picking up the larger pieces of the champagne flute, my hands trembling not from embarrassment, but from the effort of keeping myself contained. The room remained silent except for the soft jazz quartet in the corner, who had apparently decided that nothing, not even a family meltdown, would stop them from earning their fee. Jean, honey, leave that. My mother, Catherine, appeared beside me in a rustle of silk and expensive perfume. Her voice was gentle, but I caught the undertone, the same one she'd used when I was 12, and Madison had cut my hair while I slept. Just let it go. Keep the peace. Don't make waves. I stood slowly, crystal fragments still glinting on the floor around my feet like fallen stars. When I looked up, Madison's expression had shifted slightly. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Was it regret? Concern? But it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. Madison's right, I said quietly, my voice carrying farther than I intended in the acoustically perfect ballroom. I am a family disappointment. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Madison's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to agree with her. I'm the one who dropped out of law school to take care of Grandma Rose when she got sick. I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on me. But for once, I didn't care. I'm the one who works double shifts at the hospital so I can pay for my nursing degree without asking for help. I'm the one who drives a 10-year-old Honda instead of a BMW because I'm too proud to take Daddy's money. Madison's face was losing color now, her professional smile faltering at the edges. And you're absolutely right about this dress. I smoothed the fabric with my palm, feeling the slight roughness where I'd mended a small tear near the hem. I've worn it to 3 weddings, 2 graduations, and now your engagement party. Because when you're saving every penny to build a life, on your own terms, you make sacrifices. The room had gone completely silent now. Even the jazz quartet had stopped playing, their instruments hanging limp in their hands as they watched the drama unfold. But you know what, Madison? I took a step closer to her, my voice dropping to just above a whisper. At least when I look in the mirror, I see someone who earned everything she has. Can you say the same? Madison's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Trevor's arm tightened around her waist, but his eyes were fixed on me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Jean. My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Daniel Hartwell, real estate mogul and master of controlling situations, strode toward us with the confident gait of a man who had never encountered a problem money couldn't solve. That's enough. But I was already moving toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor with each deliberate step. The crowd parted before me like the Red Sea, whispers following in my wake. "Where are you going?" Madison called after me, and for the first time that evening, her voice cracked slightly. I paused at the grand entrance, my hand on the heavy brass door handle. When I turned back, I could see the entire tableau frozen like a painting. Madison, in her perfect dress with her perfect fiancé, surrounded by perfect people in a perfect room. And for once, I didn't feel like I was missing out. Home, I said simply, to my real life. The drive back to my apartment took 27 minutes through downtown Portland's Saturday night traffic. 27 minutes of replaying every word, every look, every moment of crystallized humiliation. My phone buzzed constantly. Text messages from cousins, family friends, even a few acquaintances who had witnessed the spectacle. I ignored them all. My apartment building was a converted warehouse in the arts district, nothing fancy but clean and safe. The kind of place where struggling artists and hardworking students could afford to live while chasing their dreams. As I climbed the 3 flights to my unit, my heels echoing in the concrete stairwell, I felt the weight of the evening settling on my shoulders like a heavy coat. Inside my studio apartment, I kicked off my shoes and let my hair down from its carefully constructed updo. The black dress that had caused so much commentary hung loose on my frame. I'd lost weight over the past few months, too busy with work and school to remember to eat regularly. I poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Ironic, considering how this special occasion had turned out, and sat on my second-hand couch, staring out at the city lights through my single large window. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my mother. "Call me. We need to talk." Then, another from Madison. "Jean, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to come out like that." And another from Trevor, which surprised me. "You handled that with more grace than most people would have. Respect." I set the phone aside without responding to any of them. What was there to say? Madison had meant every word. She'd just been careless enough to say them in public. The apology was damage control, nothing more. I was halfway through my wine when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Heavy, deliberate steps that stopped right outside my apartment. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps that somehow managed to sound both polite and urgent. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Who would be visiting at this hour? Through the peephole, I saw a man in an expensive-looking coat holding a briefcase and what appeared to be an envelope. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that suggested he was accustomed to being taken seriously. "Miss Jean Hartwell?" he called through the door. "My name is Richard Blackstone. I'm an attorney with Blackstone, Hayes & Associates. I apologize for the late hour, but I have some urgent documents that require your immediate attention." I kept the chain lock engaged and opened the door just wide enough to see him clearly. "Can I see some identification?" He handed me a business card through the crack, heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. Richard T. Blackstone, senior partner, estate law. The address was downtown, in one of those glass towers where lawyers charged by the minute. "What kind of documents?" I asked, still not opening the door fully. "Documents pertaining to the estate of Mrs. Rose Elizabeth Hartwell," he said solemnly. "Your grandmother. I understand she passed away 18 months ago?" My heart clenched. Grandma Rose had been the one person in my family who truly understood me, who had encouraged my independence, even when everyone else called it stubbornness. I'd spent her final 6 months caring for her around the clock, sleeping in the chair beside her hospital bed, making sure she wasn't alone. "I was the executor of her will," I said slowly. "Everything was settled over a year ago." "Not everything, Miss Hartwell." He held up the envelope, and even in the dim hallway light, I could see it was sealed with red wax. Mrs. Hartwell left specific instructions that this envelope was not to be opened or delivered until certain conditions were met. "What conditions?" His expression softened slightly. "She requested that it be delivered to you only after you had publicly stood up for yourself against family members who treated you poorly." She was quite specific about the wording. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. She couldn't have known. "Mrs. Hartwell was a very astute woman," Mr. Blackstone interrupted gently. "She understood family dynamics better than most, and according to my sources, approximately 3 hours ago at the Riverside Country Club, you did exactly what she predicted you would eventually do. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." I stared at the envelope in his hands. It was cream-colored, heavy. Paper, with my name written across the front in Grandma Rose's distinctive handwriting. The red wax seal bore her initials. R.E.H. "Your sources?" I managed to ask. Mrs. Hartwell retained my services specifically to monitor the family situation. She wanted to ensure the timing was perfect. He paused, studying my face. "She believed you would need this most when you finally found the courage to stop accepting unacceptable treatment." With shaking hands, I unlocked the chain and opened the door fully. Mr. Blackstone stepped inside, his eyes taking in my modest apartment with the same professional assessment I'd seen him use on me. "Please." I gestured toward the small dining table. "Have a seat." He set his briefcase down and handed me the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, as if it contained more than just paper. "I should mention that there are additional documents in my briefcase, but Mrs. Hartwell was very clear that you should read her letter first, alone." I turned the envelope over in my hands, running my finger along the wax seal. "Mr. Blackstone, can you tell me—" "Read the letter first," he said kindly but firmly. "Everything will make sense after that." I broke the seal carefully, not wanting to damage anything that had come from her hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once, with Grandma Rose's handwriting covering both sides. "My dearest Jean, if you're reading this, it means you've finally done what I always knew you would do. You've stopped letting them treat you like you don't matter. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Though I wish I could be there to see their faces. I know tonight was difficult. I know you're questioning everything, wondering if you did the right thing. Let me be clear. You did. You've been carrying yourself with dignity for years while they've taken advantage of your kindness. Tonight you showed them, and yourself, that kindness doesn't mean weakness. Now, onto the real reason for this letter. Remember when you used to visit me every Sunday, and we'd sit in my garden talking about your dreams? You told me once that you wanted to change the world, one patient at a time. You said you'd do it even if it meant sacrificing everything else. Well, my darling girl, it's time to stop sacrificing. The attached documents will show that you are now the sole beneficiary of my investment portfolio, which has been carefully managed since your grandfather's death. The total amount, as of my last review, was approximately $2.3 million. I dropped the letter, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't hold the paper steady. $2.3 million. $2.3 million. Mr. Blackstone, I whispered, but he held up a hand. Finish the letter. I picked it up again, forcing my eyes to focus on the words. I know this comes as a shock. Your parents and Madison know nothing about this money. I made sure of that. They assumed everything went to your father, and I let them believe it. But you, my dear, were the one who held my hand when I was dying. You were the one who gave up your dreams temporarily to make sure I wasn't alone. You were the one who loved me for who I was, not what I could give you. Use this money wisely. Finish school. Start that clinic you dreamed about. Travel. Fall in love. Buy yourself 1,000 black dresses if you want to. But most importantly, never again let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. You are more than enough, Jean. You always were. All my love, Grandma Rose P.S. I've left a small provision for Madison in my regular will, enough for a nice wedding gift, but nothing more. She'll never know how much you received unless you choose to tell her. That choice is yours. I sat in stunned silence, the letter trembling in my hands. $2.3 million. Enough to quit my job, finish school without debt, maybe even start the free clinic I'd dreamed about since I was a teenager. Mr. Blackstone reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. The investment statements, he said quietly, along with the account transfer documents. Everything is ready for your signature. I looked up at him, my vision blurry with tears. Is this real? Very real. The money has been sitting in a managed account, growing, waiting for this moment. He paused, his expression gentle. Mrs. Hartwell was quite specific that the timing had to be perfect. She wanted you to have this revelation immediately after standing up for yourself, while the lesson was fresh. Fresh. Tonight felt like a lifetime ago, but it had been less than 4 hours since Madison's words had shattered my world. 4 hours since I'd walked out of that country club feeling like the family failure. Now I was sitting in my tiny apartment, holding documents that would change everything. What happens next? I asked. That, Mr. Blackstone said with a smile, is entirely up to you. I spent the rest of that night staring at the bank documents spread across my coffee table, trying to process how dramatically my life had just shifted. But as the hours crept toward dawn, my mind kept drifting back, not to the money, but to the woman who had made this possible. Grandma Rose had understood something about our family that I was only beginning to grasp. Growing up in the Hartwell household meant understanding your place in an invisible hierarchy that had been established long before I could walk. Madison was the crown jewel, beautiful, charismatic, effortlessly perfect at everything she touched. She'd started modeling at age 6, won every school election she'd ever entered, and had college recruiters calling before she'd even taken her SATs. I was the afterthought. Not unloved exactly, but tolerated in the way families tolerate a slightly embarrassing relative who shows up to holidays wearing the wrong clothes. My parents had tried, in their own way, to shape me into another Madison. Piano lessons that lasted 3 miserable months before my teacher gently suggested I might be more suited to other pursuits. Pageant coaching that ended when I refused to wear the frilly pink dress Mom had picked out, insisting instead on a simple blue one that made me look, according to Madison, like a librarian at a funeral. The breaking point had come when I was 14. Madison was a senior then, already accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship and modeling contracts waiting for her graduation. I'd just started high school, still trying to figure out where I fit in a world that seemed designed for people like my sister. That's when Grandma Rose started inviting me to spend Sundays at her house. Her home was different from ours, smaller, quieter, filled with books instead of designer furniture. She'd grown up during the Depression, married my grandfather when he came back from Korea, and had spent 40 years as a high school English teacher. While my parents measured success In square footage and investment portfolios, Grandma Rose measured it in lives touched and differences made. "You know what your problem is, Jean?" she'd said one Sunday afternoon as we worked in her garden, dirt under our fingernails and sun warming our backs. I was 15 then, coming off another disastrous family dinner where Madison had announced her engagement to her college boyfriend, her first engagement, though not her last, while I'd sat silent, knowing that anything I shared would pale in comparison. "I have too many problems to count," I'd replied, probably with the dramatic flair only teenagers can muster. She'd laughed, her hands never pausing as she transplanted seedlings. "You keep trying to bloom in the wrong soil. Your family plants roses and expects every flower to be red and perfectly shaped. But you're not a rose, sweetheart. You're something entirely different." What am I then? A wildflower. Stronger, more resilient, capable of growing in places roses never could. But wildflowers need different things to thrive. At the time, I'd thought it was just the kind of poetic nonsense adults said to make awkward teenagers feel better. Now, sitting in my apartment with life-changing documents in front of me, I understood what she'd been trying to tell me. The pattern had been set early and never wavered. When Madison wanted to study abroad her junior year, Dad had written the check. Without question. When I'd asked for help with my car insurance so I could drive to my part-time job, I'd been told it would build character to figure it out myself. Madison's college tuition, room, and board had been covered entirely by my parents, even though she'd had scholarship offers. "We want you to focus on your studies and social connections," Mom had explained. "Networking is so important for your future." When it was my turn for college, the conversation had been different. "We know you're more independent, John. You'll appreciate the accomplishment more if you work for it yourself." They'd co-signed my student loans, which I'd been grateful for at the time, not realizing that Madison's education had cost them nearly $200,000 while mine would cost me the next decade of loan payments. The real divide had become apparent during my sophomore year at Portland State. I was working 3 jobs, tutoring struggling high school students, serving coffee at a campus cafe, and doing weekend shifts at a local nursing home. My grades were suffering, but I was surviving, which felt like victory enough. That's when Grandma Rose got sick. It started small, forgetting names, misplacing keys, losing track of conversations mid-sentence. The family meetings began in earnest, everyone suddenly concerned about her welfare. Madison flew in from Los Angeles, where she was pursuing opportunities in entertainment, which was family code for dating a series of increasingly wealthy men while occasionally booking commercial work. "We need to look into care facilities," Dad had announced during one particularly tense Sunday dinner. "Somewhere professional, with trained staff." "She doesn't want to leave her house," I protested. "She's lived there for 40 years. It's her home." Madison had sighed dramatically, the sound that meant she was about to explain something to someone too stupid to understand. "Jean, this isn't about what she wants anymore. It's about what she needs. Professional care is expensive, but it's the responsible choice." I could take care of her. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged one of their looks, the kind of wordless communication that came from 30 years of marriage, and mutual understanding that their younger daughter often suggested impractical things. "Honey," Mom had said gently, "you're barely managing school and work as it is. Grandma needs round-the-clock care." I could move in with her, take my classes online, adjust my work schedule, and throw away your education? Dad's voice carried that particular tone he used when discussing my more unrealistic ideas. "Jean, you're finally making progress toward a real career. We can't let you derail that for something trained professionals should handle." But I'd already made up my mind. That night, I'd driven to Grandma Rose's house and found her sitting in her garden, even though it was nearly November and frost warnings had been issued. "I want to take care of you," I'd told her without a preamble. She'd looked at me for a long moment, her eyes still sharp, despite the confusion that had been creeping in around the edges. That would mean giving up a lot. Not giving up. Postponing. There's a difference. Your parents won't understand. My parents don't understand me. Anyway, she'd smiled then. The same smile I remembered from 1,000 Sunday afternoons. Wildflowers, she'd murmured. Growing where roses never could. The next 18 months had been the hardest and most meaningful of my life. I'd moved into her spare bedroom, converted my class schedule to online learning, and rearranged my work life around her care needs. Some days were good. We'd spend hours in her garden, talking about books and life and dreams. Other days were harder, when she'd forget my name or become agitated about things that existed only in her fading memory. Madison had visited exactly 3 times during those 18 months. Each visit followed the same pattern. She'd arrive in whatever luxury car her current boyfriend had loaned her, spend an hour making awkward conversation, take a few selfies to post on social media about family time, and then leave with promises to visit again soon. My parents had been more present but somehow less helpful. They'd stop by weekly, usually bringing groceries or flowers, but they'd always seemed uncomfortable with the reality of caregiving. They'd hover near the door, making pleasant conversation about the weather or neighborhood news, but they'd never stay long enough to give me a real break. "You're so good at this," Mom would say, as if my ability to help Grandma Rose with her medication or encourage her to eat was some sort of mystical talent rather than simple compassion combined with stubborn determination. The truth was, taking care of her had taught me more about myself than 4 years of college ever could have. I'd discovered that I was stronger than I'd thought, more patient than I'd believed possible, and absolutely certain that I wanted to spend my life helping people during their most vulnerable moments. When Grandma Rose died, peacefully in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in March, I'd been holding her hand. The funeral had been well attended, filled with former students and neighbors whose lives she'd touched. Madison had delivered a beautiful eulogy about the importance of family and the lasting impact of love, while I'd sat in the front row, still numb from exhaustion and grief. The will reading had been straightforward. The house went to my father, along with what everyone assumed was the bulk of her savings. Madison received a $25,000 education fund that she'd immediately used for a down payment on a condo in West Hollywood. I'd inherited her books, her garden tools, and her jewelry. Sentimental, items that everyone agreed were perfect for Jean. I'd been grateful for the books and deeply touched by the jewelry, especially her simple gold wedding band that I'd started wearing on my right hand. But I'd also been terrified about my financial future. 18 months of part-time work and online classes had left me behind both academically and economically. My student loan debt had continued accumulating interest, and I'd burned through most of my savings during the months when Grandma Rose's care needs made regular work impossible. That's when I'd made the decision to switch to nursing. It had been a practical choice as much as an emotional one. My pre-med classes transferred well enough, and nursing school offered a clearer path to employment and financial stability. More importantly, those months caring for Grandma Rose had shown me that I was naturally suited to healthcare work, in a way I'd never been suited to the pre-law track my parents had originally encouraged. Nursing school had been brutal, clinical. Rotations that started at 5 a.m., studying that stretched past midnight, and the constant pressure of being responsible for other people's lives. But it had also been the first time in my life that I'd felt like I was exactly where I belonged. My classmates had become my chosen family, a group of determined, compassionate people who understood what it meant to sacrifice for something bigger than themselves. We'd studied together, supported each other through failed exams and difficult patients, and celebrated every small victory like it was a major triumph. Meanwhile, Madison's life had continued its upward trajectory. After the West Hollywood condo, she'd moved to New York, then back to Los Angeles, then to San Francisco, each move financed by a new relationship with a man who could provide increasingly luxurious lifestyles. She'd never held a traditional job, but she'd somehow managed to build an Instagram following of over 100,000 people who seemed fascinated by her ability to live beautifully without any visible means of support. The family's response to our divergent paths had been predictable. Madison's lifestyle was discussed with admiration and a touch of envy. "She's so resourceful," Mom would say. "She's really learned how to make connections work for her." My choices were met with a different kind of commentary. "Jean's always been more practical," Dad would explain to relatives. "She needs something stable, something she can count on." The implication was clear. Madison was destined for extraordinary things, while I was destined for ordinary ones. The engagement to Trevor Blackwood III had been announced 6 months ago with all the fanfare my family could muster. Trevor was perfect on paper. Old money, prestigious law firm, political connections, and the kind of New England good looks that photographed well at charity galas. Madison had met him at a networking event in San Francisco, and within 3 months, he'd proposed with a ring that had been featured in Town & Country magazine. Planning the engagement party had become a family obsession. Madison had flown home twice for venue scouting, once for dress shopping, and several additional times for what she'd called coordination meetings, but which seemed to mostly involve expensive lunches and spa appointments with our mother, i.e. been included in the planning process the way a distant relative might be included, consulted occasionally about practical matters, but never asked for input on anything that actually mattered. When I'd suggested that the Riverside Country Club might be unnecessarily extravagant for an engagement party, the suggestion had been dismissed with the kind of gentle condescension usually reserved for children who don't understand adult concerns. "Jean, honey," Madison had said, her voice dripping with the patience of someone explaining something obvious, "this isn't just a party. It's about making the right impression. Trevor's family expects a certain level of presentation." The guest list had been another source of tension. Madison had wanted to invite everyone, family friends, business contacts, college acquaintances, Instagram followers she'd met once at various events. The final count had reached nearly 250 people, which had required upgrading to the club's largest ballroom and adding a full cocktail hour before dinner. When I'd mentioned that the guest list seemed to include a lot of people Madison barely knew, she'd laughed that brittle laugh that meant the conversation was over. "It's called networking, Jean. You should try it sometime." The dress conversation had been ongoing for weeks. Madison had been very clear about her vision for the event. Elegant, sophisticated, Instagram-worthy. She'd even created a Pinterest board of inspiration photos that she'd shared with the female guests, most of whom could afford to shop accordingly. I'd done my best with what I had. The black dress wasn't designer, but it was well-made and appropriate. I'd paired it with Grandma Rose's pearl earrings and the gold bracelet she'd given me for my birthday the year before she got sick. I'd thought I looked respectable, even pretty. But respectable and pretty weren't enough for an event designed to showcase Madison's ascension to a higher social class. In the world she was marrying into, your dress wasn't just clothing. It was a statement about your worth, your connections, your place in the hierarchy. Standing in that ballroom, holding the shattered remains of a champagne glass while 200 people stared at me with a mixture of pity and amusement, I'd finally understood what Grandma Rose had been trying to tell me all those years ago. I wasn't failing to be a good Rose. I was succeeding at being exactly what I was supposed to be, something entirely different, something that didn't need their approval to bloom. The money changed everything, but not in the way people might expect. It wasn't about the luxury or the freedom from financial stress, though those things mattered. It was about validation, proof that someone had seen my worth when my own family couldn't. Grandma Rose had watched me sacrifice my original timeline to care for her, had seen me rebuild my life around service to others, and had witnessed my family's casual dismissal of everything I'd accomplished. And she'd decided that when the moment came, When I finally stopped accepting unacceptable treatment, I should have the resources to build whatever life I wanted. Sitting in my apartment as the sun rose over Portland, I realized that the real gift wasn't the money. It was permission to stop apologizing for being different, stop trying to earn approval from people who would never give it, and start building something that mattered. The engagement party had been the end of one story, and the beginning of another. I just hadn't known it yet. My phone started ringing at 7:43 a.m., barely 3 hours after Mr. Blackstone had left my apartment. The caller ID showed my mother's contact photo, a professional headshot from her real estate marketing materials where she looked polished and confident. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 7:47 a.m., then 7:52. By 8:15, I had 6 missed calls and a string of increasingly urgent text messages. "Jean, please call me back. We need to talk about last night. Your father and I are very concerned about how you left things. Madison is devastated. She never meant to hurt you. Call me. Please." I was sitting at my kitchen table, still in my robe, the inheritance documents spread out like a new map of my future. The bank statements showed monthly growth that exceeded my annual salary, investment portfolios with names I recognized from financial news, a money market account that had been quietly accumulating interest for over a year. But even with this life-changing windfall in front of me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. The 7th call came at 8:31, and this time I answered. "Jean, thank God." My mother's voice was strained, lacking her usual composed confidence. "We've been worried sick." "I'm fine, Mom." "Are you?" "Because the way you left last night, storming out like that, it wasn't like you. People were asking questions. There it was. Not concerned for my feelings or acknowledgement of what had happened, but worried about what people were thinking. In the Hartwell family hierarchy, public perception always trumped private pain. "What kind of questions?" I asked, genuinely curious about how they'd spun my exit. "Well, you know how people talk. Mrs. Pemberton from the country club board asked if there was some kind of family drama, and Trevor's mother mentioned that his family friends were confused by the incident." "Confused by Madison calling me a broke loser in front of 200 people? Jean." Mom's voice carried that particular tone that meant I was being unreasonable. "Madison feels terrible about her choice of words. She was stressed about the party, and sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we say things we don't mean." She meant every word. "That's not true. She's been calling and texting you all morning. Haven't you seen her messages?" I glanced at my phone. Madison's name appeared 17 times in my notification feed, but I hadn't opened any of her texts. "I've been busy." "Busy? With what?" "It's Sunday morning." "Personal matters." There was a pause, and I could almost hear my mother recalibrating her approach. She'd spent 30 years in real estate, which had taught her how to navigate difficult conversations and find ways to move past obstacles toward her desired outcome. "Your father and I think it would be good for everyone if you came over for brunch. Madison and Trevor are here and we could all sit down and clear the air. Work this out as a family." "Work what out exactly?" "The misunderstanding from last night." "There was no misunderstanding, Mom. Madison humiliated me in public because she wanted to establish dominance in front of her new social circle. She succeeded." "Jean, that's a very harsh interpretation." "It's an accurate interpretation." Another pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, my father's low rumble and what sounded like Madison's higher-pitched interjections. "Will you at least talk to Madison? She's right here, and she wants to apologize properly." Before I could respond, the phone was passed, and Madison's voice filled my ear. But instead of the confident, cutting tone from the night before, she sounded different, smaller, almost tentative. "Jean? Look, I know you're mad and I get it. I really do. But can we please talk about this?" "I'm listening." "Not like this. Not over the phone. Can you come over? Please? I want to explain what happened last night. What's to explain? You said what you said. That's just it. I didn't mean it the way it came out. I was trying to be, I don't know, playful, like the way we used to tease each other when we were kids. But it came out wrong, and I've been sick about it ever since. I almost laughed. Playful teasing. That's how she was reframing public humiliation in front of the city's social elite. The revisionist history was already beginning. Madison, you looked directly at me in front of 200 people and called me a broke loser who couldn't afford proper clothes for your engagement party. In what universe is that playful teasing? I know, it sounds awful when you put it like that. But you have to understand. I was so nervous about everything being perfect. Trevor's family is very particular about these kinds of events. His mother had already made comments about keeping things appropriately elegant, and I was just feeling so much pressure. So you decided to make me an example of what inappropriate looks like? No. God, no, it's just, you know how you get. Sometimes, you're so independent, so determined to do everything yourself, and sometimes it comes across as, well, like you're making a statement about the rest of us. I blinked, trying to process what I'd just heard. Making a statement? Like you're above caring about appearances. Like you're too good for the things that matter to the rest of us. And last night, with Trevor's family watching everything so carefully, I guess I just snapped. This was fascinating. In Madison's mind, my financial limitations weren't the result of being a full-time student working multiple jobs to pay for my education. They were a deliberate choice designed to make her look bad. So you're saying my wearing a dress I've worn before was actually an attack on you? I'm saying it felt like you were making a point, like you wanted people to notice that you were the only one not dressed to the same standard as everyone else. Maybe because I couldn't afford to dress to the same standard as everyone else? But you could have asked. You could have said something, and we would have helped you find something more appropriate. Mom would have taken you shopping, or I could have loaned you something from my closet. There it was, the foundation of Madison's justification. In her world, my failure to ask for help with something I shouldn't have needed help with was somehow more offensive than her public attack on my dignity. Madison, do you hear yourself right now? What do you mean? You're angry at me for not asking you to fix a problem you created in your own head. You decided my dress was inappropriate. You decided it was somehow about you, and then you punished me for not reading your mind and preemptively solving it. That's not, it's more complicated than that. Is it? I heard muffled conversation in the background, and then Trevor's voice came on the line. This surprised me. We'd barely spoken directly in all the months he'd been with Madison. Jean? It's Trevor. I wanted to apologize for last night. What happened wasn't fair to you. His voice was steady, earnest in a way that made me think he might actually mean it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Madison's been beating herself up about it since we got home. She knows she handled it badly. Handled what badly? The stress of party planning, or the decision to humiliate me in front of your families? There was a pause. Both, I think. Look, I know we don't know each other well, but I've heard a lot about you from Madison and your parents. The way you took care of your grandmother, your work at the hospital, nursing school. It's impressive. Really impressive. But Madison's been dealing with a lot of pressure lately. My family can be demanding about certain social expectations. There's a lot of scrutiny that comes with our engagement, and I think she's been feeling overwhelmed, so she took it out on me. She made a mistake, a big one. But it came from a place of anxiety, not malice. I found myself genuinely curious about Trevor's perspective. He seemed more thoughtful than I'd expected, but he was still fundamentally missing the point. Trevor, can I ask you something? Of course. If one of your family members had called Madison a broke loser in front of 200 people at a party celebrating your engagement, would you be asking her to understand their anxiety and forgive them? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. That's a fair point. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like the expectation is always for me to be the understanding one, to absorb the hurt and make allowances for everyone else's stress and pressure and complicated feelings. Jean? I spent 18 months putting my life on hold to take care of our grandmother while Madison was finding herself in various cities with various boyfriends. Did anyone ask her to be understanding of my stress? Of my financial pressure? Of my grief? The phone went quiet again, and then Madison's voice returned, sharper now than it had been before. That's not fair, Jean. You chose to take care of Grandma. No one forced you to do that. Someone had to do it. There were other options. Professional care facilities, trained nurses. She didn't want to go to a facility. She wanted to stay in her own home. But that doesn't mean you had to sacrifice your entire life for her comfort. You could have found a compromise. Like what? Like sharing the responsibility. Like asking for help. Like not making it your personal mission to be the perfect granddaughter. The words hit like a slap. Madison was actually angry at me for caring for Grandma Rose. In her mind, my decision to prioritize our grandmother's final months over my own convenience was another example of me making a statement, this time about my superior devotion to family. So taking care of her was wrong? Taking care of her while making the rest of us look bad was wrong. You turned it into this martyr complex where you were the only one who really loved her. The only one who really understood what she needed. I never said that. You didn't have to say it. It was written all over your face every time we visited. This looks like you were so disappointed in us for not dropping everything to play nurse. I was genuinely stunned. Madison, I was exhausted. I was working 3 jobs and going to school and managing her medication schedule and doctor appointments. If I looked tired or stressed when you visited, it's because I was tired and stressed. See? There it is again. Poor Jean, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders while everyone else just lives their selfish lives. That's not what It's exactly what you do. You make choices that are harder than they need to be, and then you act like a victim when those choices have consequences. Last night was just another example. Last night I was publicly humiliated by my own sister. Last night you showed up to my engagement party dressed like you were making a point about how much better you are than everyone else, and when I called you out on it, you decided to play the victim and storm out dramatically. The conversation had taken a surreal turn. Madison had managed to reframe the entire incident so that she was the wronged party, a stressed bride-to-be who had been unfairly provoked by my passive-aggressive fashion choices and then abandoned by my selfish refusal to accept her justified criticism. Madison, do you actually believe what you just said? I believe you've been playing this game for years, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of walking on eggshells around you because you might decide I'm being insensitive to your struggles. I'm tired of watching Mom and Dad treat you like this fragile flower who can't handle honest feedback. Honest feedback? Yes. Someone needed to tell you that your choices have been self-defeating. Someone needed to point out that you could have had help with school, with money, with everything. But you chose to do it the hard way so you could feel superior to the rest of us. Superior? Like you're the only one with integrity. Like you're the only one who understands what really matters. Like the rest of us are shallow and materialistic because we don't think suffering is a virtue. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by documents that proved my grandmother had seen something in me that my own family couldn't recognize, and listened to my sister explain how my existence was actually an ongoing attack on her character. Madison, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Okay. Do you love me? The pause that followed was answer enough, but she eventually spoke. Of course I love you, you're my sister. Do you like me? Another pause. Jean, that's not... It's complicated. It's really not. Do you enjoy my company? Do you value my opinions? Do you think I add something positive to your life? I think I think we're very different people who want different things, and sometimes that creates tension. That's not an answer. Fine. Sometimes you exhaust me. Sometimes I feel like I can never be good enough because you've set this impossible standard for what it means to be a good person. And sometimes I resent that mom and dad expect me to be more like you. They've never expected you to be like me. They've never said it out loud, but I can see it. Every time you do something selfless or noble, I can see them thinking that I should be more like that. More serious, more dedicated, more willing to sacrifice for other people. Madison, and the truth is I don't want to be like that. I don't want to spend my life taking care of other people at the expense of my own happiness. I don't want to wear the same dress to every formal event because I'm too proud to accept help. I don't want to make my family feel guilty for living comfortably. I've never asked you to feel guilty. You don't have to ask. You just exist, being this perfect example of virtue and sacrifice, and the rest of us look selfish by comparison. So last night was, what? Cutting me down to size? Last night was me finally saying what everyone's been thinking, that your choices aren't actually noble, they're stubborn, and that maybe if you stopped making everything so difficult for yourself, you'd be happier and the rest of us wouldn't have to watch you struggle all the time. I looked at the bank statements spread across my table, at the investment portfolios that would eliminate every financial stress Madison had just listed, and realized something profound. The money wasn't going to change anything with my family. Madison's problems with me had nothing to do with my bank account, and everything to do with her need to believe that her choices were not only valid but superior. Madison, I want to thank you. For what? For be honest. For finally telling me what you really think. Does that mean you'll come over? So can we work this out? I smiled, looking out my window at the Portland skyline. Actually, I think you've already worked it out perfectly. What do you mean? I mean, you've shown me exactly where I stand with this family, and that's incredibly valuable information. John, you're scaring me. What are you talking about? I'm talking about clarity. For the first time in my life, I understand exactly how you see me. And I think it's time I started seeing you just as clearly. Before she could respond, I hung up the phone. For a moment, I sat in the silence of my apartment, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace with my own choices. Then I picked up my phone and sent a single text message to my family group chat. We need to talk. All of us. But this time, we're doing it on my terms. The family group chat exploded within minutes of my message. Madison responded first. Jean, please don't do anything dramatic. We can fix this. Then Dad. What terms? We're family. We don't negotiate terms. Mom tried a softer approach. Sweetheart, let's just sit down and talk like adults. I waited 2 hours before responding with an address. Not their house, not mine, but the conference room I'd reserved at the downtown Marriott. Neutral territory where I could control the environment and, more importantly, the exit strategy. Room 1247. 3 p.m. today. Come alone. No friends, no plus ones, no Trevor. This is a family business. The responses were immediate and predictably resistant. Madison demanded to know why Trevor couldn't come, claiming he was practically family already. Dad questioned why we needed a hotel conference room for a simple conversation. Mom suggested her house would be more comfortable and private. I didn't respond to any of it. At 2:45 p.m., I sat in the sterile conference room, my inheritance documents organized in a leather portfolio that had belonged to Grandma Rose. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a navy blue suit that I'd bought for job interviews, paired with her pearl necklace and the gold watch she'd given me for my nursing school graduation. Professional, composed, unmistakably in control. Dad arrived first, his expression a mixture of confusion and irritation as he took in the corporate setting. Jean, what's this about? If you wanted privacy, we could have talked in my office. Your office is your territory, I replied calmly. This is neutral ground. Mom appeared next, her real estate training evident in how quickly she assessed the room. The long conference table, the wall-mounted screen, the formal atmosphere that suggested serious business rather than family reconciliation. Honey, this feels very official. Are we in some kind of legal trouble? Not yet, I said, which made Dad's eyebrows shoot up. Madison was last, arriving exactly at 3 p.m. in a cloud of expensive perfume and barely contained anxiety. She'd dressed down from her usual Instagram-ready appearance, wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, but looked casual enough to suggest she wasn't taking this too seriously. Okay, we're here, she announced, settling into a chair across from me. Can we please just clear the air and move past this whole thing? I've already apologized, and I meant it. I opened the portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper, not the bank statements or investment reports, but Grandma Rose's letter. Before we discuss last night, I need to share something with all of you. Dad leaned forward, his businessman instincts activated by the formal tone. What kind of something? Yesterday evening, I received a visit from Richard Blackstone, the attorney who handled Grandma Rose's estate. We settled that over a year ago, Mom said quickly. Everything was distributed according to her will. Not everything. I held up the letter, letting them see the distinctive handwriting and the broken wax seal. Grandma Rose left additional instructions that were only to be executed under specific circumstances. Madison's eyes narrowed. What kind of circumstances? I smiled, feeling the power of information asymmetry for the first time in my life. She requested that this letter be delivered to me only after I had publicly stood up for myself against family members who treated me poorly. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically see the gears turning in their heads as they tried to process the implications. Jean, Dad's voice carried a warning tone. If you're suggesting that last night was somehow... I'm not suggesting anything, I interrupted, my voice steady and professional. I'm stating facts. According to Mr. Blackstone's records, Grandma Rose predicted that eventually one of you would push too far and I would finally stop accepting unacceptable treatment. She was right. Madison's face had gone pale. What does the letter say? Instead of answering, I read it aloud, every word carefully enunciated. The room grew quieter with each sentence, and by the time I reached the part about the $2.3 million inheritance, you could have heard a pin drop. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it back in the portfolio. Questions? Mom found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. $2.3 million? Plus accumulated interest over the past 18 months. The current total is approximately $2.7 million, Dad's businessman facade cracked. That's impossible. I was the executor of her estate. I saw all the accounts, all the investments. You saw what she wanted you to see. The accounts you knew about totaled roughly $300,000, which went to you and Madison as specified in her primary will. The investment portfolio she'd been building for 40 years was held in a separate trust with very specific distribution instructions. Why? Madison's voice was small, almost childlike. Why would she do that? I pulled out one of the bank statements and slid it across the table. Because she was paying attention. She watched me sacrifice my original life plan to care for her. She saw how the family responded to that sacrifice. And she decided that when the inevitable moment came, when one of you finally revealed how little you actually valued me, I should have the resources to build whatever life I wanted. The numbers on the statement seemed to hypnotize them. Dad picked it up with trembling fingers, his eyes scanning the figures like he was reading a foreign language. She was manipulating us, Madison said suddenly, her voice gaining strength. She set this whole thing up. She wanted us to fail some kind of test. Did she? I asked mildly. Or did she simply understand the family dynamics better than anyone wanted to admit? She pitted us against each other. Madison, nobody forced you to call me a broke loser in front of 200 people. Nobody scripted that moment for you. But she knew. She knew something like that would happen, and she used it as an excuse to what? To leave her money to the granddaughter who actually took care of her? Dad set the bank statement down carefully, his face cycling through. Emotions I'd never seen before. Shock, confusion, and something that looked disturbingly like calculation. Jean, I need you to understand something. This inheritance changes things. It changes everything. Does it? Yes. It means you're not. What I mean is, your financial situation isn't what we thought it was. My financial situation yesterday was exactly what you thought it was. I was a nursing student working multiple jobs to pay off student loans while living in a studio apartment and wearing the same dress to formal events because I couldn't afford more. But now I have choices, which brings me to why we're here. I pulled out a second folder, this one containing printouts of text messages, emails, and a detailed timeline I'd prepared that morning. I want to discuss the pattern of treatment that led to yesterday's incident. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Jean, if this is about money, if you feel like we should have helped more with school or expenses, this isn't about money. This is about respect. I opened the folder and began reading. From my notes, Madison's college expenses covered entirely by family funds, $180,000. My college expenses are covered by family funds, $0. That's not fair, Dad protested. Madison had scholarship opportunities, which she turned down because you told her she didn't need them. Meanwhile, you told me that paying my own way would build character. I flipped to the next page. Madison's living expenses while finding herself in various cities over the past 5 years, subsidized by family, approximately $75,000. My living expenses subsidized by my family during the same period, $0. Madison needed support during a transitional time, Mom said defensively. And I didn't? When I was caring for Grandma Rose while working 3 jobs and going to school, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a specific text thread. Madison, March 15th of last year, 3 months after Grandma's funeral. Can you spot me $2,000 for first and last month's rent? I found the perfect place in Soma but need to move fast. Madison's face flushed. You screenshotted my private messages? I screenshotted the family group chat where Dad immediately offered to wire the money. No. Questions asked. The same week I was working 16-hour days to avoid defaulting on my student loans. The room fell silent again. I could see them processing not just the information, but the methodical way I was presenting it. This wasn't an emotional outburst, or a desperate plea for understanding. This was a systematic deconstruction of years of family dynamics, backed by documentation. Jean, Mom's voice was careful, measured. If you felt like we were being unfair, why didn't you say something sooner? I did. Multiple times. Remember when I asked for help with car insurance so I could keep working? Dad told me it would build character to figure it out myself. Remember when I mentioned struggling with book costs for nursing school? You suggested I check them out from the library instead. But those were small amounts, Dad said. If we'd known you were really struggling. You did know. You chose not to see it because acknowledging my struggles would have required acknowledging the disparity in how you treated your daughters. I pulled out another document, a printed email from 2 years ago. This is from Mom, sent to her book club, about how proud she was that I was so independent and self-sufficient, unlike Madison, who needed more guidance and support. You turned my financial desperation into a character trait to brag about. Mom's face crumpled. I didn't mean it that way. How did you mean it? I meant that you were strong, capable, that you didn't need as much help as Madison did. Based on what evidence? When have I ever been in a position where I didn't need help but Madison did? The question hung in the air unanswered because we all knew the truth. They'd decided I needed less help because giving me help would have meant giving Madison less, and that was never an option. Madison found her voice again, though it shook. Slightly. So what is this? Revenge? You're going to wave your inheritance in our faces and make us feel guilty? No, Madison. I'm going to give you a choice. I pulled out the final set of documents, copies of nursing school applications, apartment listings, and business proposals I'd been researching for months. I'm finishing nursing school with my inheritance money. No more student loans, no more working 3 jobs, no more financial stress. After graduation, I'm opening a free clinic in Grandma Rose's neighborhood, the one where she taught for 40 years. I'm going to do exactly what she and I talked about during all those Sunday afternoons. Help people who can't afford help. Dad's businessman instincts kicked in. Jean, that's admirable, but starting a medical practice requires more than just initial capital. You'll need business partners, medical equipment, insurance, licensing, all of which I can now afford, thanks to Grandma Rose. But you don't have experience running a business. You could lose everything. It's my money to lose. The words hit like a physical blow. For the first time in my adult life, I had said something my father couldn't argue with, couldn't override with his superior knowledge or business experience. What's the choice? Madison asked quietly. The choice is simple. You can continue treating me like the family disappointment who doesn't deserve the same consideration as everyone else. In which case, I'll build my new life completely independently, and our relationship will be limited to polite greetings at unavoidable family events. Or, Mom asked, or you can acknowledge that your treatment of me has been fundamentally unfair, make a genuine effort to change how you see me and interact with me, and be part of the life I'm building. That sounds like an ultimatum, Dad said. It's not an ultimatum. It's a boundary. For the first time in my life, I have the financial independence to enforce it. Madison leaned back in her chair, her earlier anxiety replaced by something harder to read. And if we choose option 1, if we decide we don't want to play by your new rules? I smiled, the same calm smile I'd perfected during difficult shifts, at the hospital when families became hostile about their loved one's care. Then you'll discover that the broke loser you humiliated last night no longer exists. In her place is someone who doesn't need your approval, doesn't want your help, and doesn't have to tolerate your disrespect. You're threatening to cut us off? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I'm explaining the natural consequences of continuing to treat me like I don't matter. The difference is that now, those consequences will actually affect you instead of just me. The silence stretched for several minutes. I could see them each processing the fundamental shift that had occurred, not just in my bank account, but in the entire power structure of our family relationships. Finally, Dad spoke. What exactly would option 2 look like? I opened my portfolio one final time and pulled out a handwritten list. I'm glad you asked. Let me be very specific about what genuine change would involve. As I began reading from my list, I watched their faces change from shock to resistance to something that might have been the beginning of actual understanding. For the first time in my life, they were hanging on my every word. My list was comprehensive, detailed, and non-negotiable. As I read each point aloud in that hotel conference room, I watched my family's expressions shift from hopeful compliance to growing resistance. They'd expected vague requests for more respect or better communication. Instead, they got specific, measurable changes that would require them to fundamentally alter how they operated. But before I could finish reading my demands, my phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Can we meet? There's something you need to know about the engagement party. I showed the message to Madison. Your fiancé wants to talk to me. Her face went pale. About what? I guess we'll find out. I gathered my documents and stood. You have until tomorrow, at noon, to decide which option you choose. After that, I start implementing my new boundaries regardless of your choice. 24 hours later, everything had changed. I met Trevor at a coffee shop in the Pearl District, where he showed me something that would accelerate the consequences beyond anything I could have predicted. His phone contained a video from the engagement party, not just the moment of my humiliation, but what happened immediately after I left. On the screen, I watched Madison turn to Trevor's mother, Evelyn Blackwood, with a triumphant smile. "I'm sorry you had to see that. Jean's always been dramatic about money. She could afford better clothes if she wanted to, but she likes playing the struggling student for sympathy." Evelyn Blackwood's response was ice cold. "I see. And this is typical behavior for your family." "Oh, Jean's not typical of our family at all," Madison laughed. "The rest of us understand that appearances matter. Jean thinks she's above all that." Trevor set his phone down carefully. "My mother called off the engagement this morning." "What?" "She said anyone who could speak about their own family member that way, especially after publicly humiliating them, wasn't suitable for our family." His voice was flat. "She's also interested in meeting with you about potential funding for your clinic plans." The irony was staggering. Madison's attempt to humiliate me had instead opened doors I never could have accessed on my own, while destroying her own future in the process. By evening, the consequences were cascading beyond my control. Someone had posted Trevor's video online, and it was spreading across social media like wildfire. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, family friends, and people I hadn't spoken to in years. Madison called at 9 p.m. sobbing. "Jean, please, you have to help me. Everything's falling apart. What's happening? The video has 2 million views. People are calling me a sociopath. My modeling agency dropped me. Trevor's family wants nothing to do with me." Her voice broke completely. "My life is imploding." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Madison, I can't fix this for you." Can't or won't? Both. You made choices, and now you're facing the consequences. The same way I've had to face the consequences of my choices for years. That's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. The only difference is that your consequences are public. She hung up without another word. The next morning, I got a text from my father at 6:47 a.m. Emergency family meeting. My office. 8 a.m. Non-negotiable. Instead of rushing to his office in a panic like I would have done a week ago, I deleted the message and went for a run. When I returned, I had 14 missed calls and 23 text messages, escalating from requests to demands to outright threats. The final message read, "If you don't show up, you're dead to this family." I screenshotted it and called Amanda Chen, the business attorney I'd retained the day before. "Based on what you've told me," Amanda said when I arrived at her office, "you need immediate legal protection. Your family is escalating into harassment territory." She was right. By noon, they weren't just calling me. They were calling my school, my work, my friends, trying to pressure me through other people. Someone had contacted my nursing program claiming I was having a mental health crisis. My former hospital supervisor called to check on me after my father had reached out expressing concern about my recent behavioral changes. "I need a formal cease and desist order sent to my family," I told Amanda. "All of them." "That's the nuclear option," she warned. "Once you formally cut contact, repairing those relationships becomes nearly impossible." Good. The cease and desist. Letters were delivered that afternoon. Within an hour, my phone exploded with blocked calls and texts from unknown numbers. But I was ready for them now. Instead of hiding at home, I was across town having dinner with Evelyn Blackwood at her family's private club. She was everything I'd expected. Elegant, sharp, and completely unimpressed by dramatics. "Ms. Hartwell," she said, "I want to discuss funding your clinic. The Blackwood Foundation partners with exactly the kind of principled healthcare providers You've shown yourself to be. We spent 2 hours discussing startup costs, staffing requirements, and partnership structures. By the time coffee was served, we had the framework for a collaboration that would fully fund my clinic for its first 3 years. There's one more thing, Evelyn said as we prepared to leave. Your father contacted me this afternoon, offering me a $50 million development deal in exchange for withdrawing our support for your project. My stomach dropped. And I told him that anyone who would try to sabotage their own daughter's healthcare mission isn't someone I'd do business with under any circumstances. 3 months later, I stood in the main examination room of the Rose Hartwell Community Health Clinic, watching our volunteer physician explain diabetes management to Maria Santos, a grandmother who'd been rationing her insulin because she couldn't afford regular doctor visits. You never have to choose between your medication and groceries again, the doctor assured her in Spanish, while I prepared supplies to send home with Maria. We're here for you. The clinic had been open for 6 weeks and was already serving over 100 patients who had nowhere else to turn. I'd named it after Grandma Rose, honoring both her memory and her values. Every day brought stories like Maria's, people who'd been invisible to the medical system until we created a place where they mattered. My personal life had transformed just as dramatically. I'd moved to a beautiful apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Mount Hood. I was dating David Chen, Amanda's brother and a pediatrician at OHSU, who valued my mind and character over my family connections or social status. Most importantly, I'd learned to recognize my own worth independent of external validation. The clinic's success was wonderful, but it wasn't the foundation of my self-worth. That foundation had been built through years of challenges that I'd met with integrity, compassion, and resilience. The cease and desist orders had been held. My family had made no direct contact for 2 months, though I occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. Madison had left Portland entirely, attempting to rebrand herself somewhere new. Dad's business reputation had taken a significant hit when word spread about his attempt to sabotage my clinic funding. Mom had apparently started therapy, though I'd heard this through third parties. One evening, I found an envelope slipped under the clinic door. Inside was a letter from Mom, no return address, respecting the no-contact boundary while still reaching out. John, I know you said no contact, and I'm not asking you to respond. I just needed to tell you that you were right about everything. The way we treated you wasn't fair. The way we dismissed your struggles while enabling Madison wasn't acceptable. I've been in therapy trying to understand how we failed you so completely. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing because you deserve to know that someone in this family finally sees your worth. Grandma Rose would be so proud of what you've built. I'm proud of the woman you've become despite our failures. As parents, I hope someday we can earn the right to be part of your life again. Mommy read the letter twice, sitting in my car as Portland's winter rain drummed against the windows. For the first time since this began, I felt something approaching. Grief for the relationship we'd never had, but alongside the grief was validation. After 29 years, my mother had finally seen me clearly. A week later, Madison called. I almost declined, but curiosity won. Jean? Her voice was different, smaller, less confident. I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I needed to apologize. Really apologize. What do you want, Madison? I'm in therapy now. Court-ordered, actually, after some legal issues from online harassment. She paused. I've been working on understanding why I treated you the way I did. I waited. The therapist says I saw you as a threat. Every time you accomplished something, or showed strength, I felt like it diminished my importance. So I kept trying to keep you small so I could stay big. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that what I did wasn't about you. It was about my own insecurity. You deserved better from all of us, and I'm sorry. Really sorry. After she hung up, I sat in my office surrounded by patient files and funding proposals, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been the invisible daughter, working multiple jobs and carrying everyone else's expectations. Today, I was running a thriving healthcare organization, in a healthy relationship, and finally free from toxic family dynamics. The inheritance had been the catalyst, but the real transformation had been internal. I'd learned that I didn't need anyone's permission to value myself. I didn't need external validation to know my worth. Looking back, I could see that Grandma Rose's final gift hadn't just been financial freedom. It had been permission to stop apologizing for who I was. She'd seen my potential when my own family couldn't, and she'd made sure I'd have the resources to build whatever life I wanted. That evening, as I locked up the clinic after seeing our last patient, I thought about Grandma Rose's words from all those Sunday afternoons. "You're not a rose, sweetheart. You're a wildflower, stronger, more resilient, capable of growing in places roses never could." She'd been right. Wildflowers don't need perfect soil to bloom. They just need space and sunlight and the freedom to grow in their own way. For the first time in my life, I had all three. Standing on the sidewalk outside the clinic, watching the lights come on in the neighborhood where Grandma Rose had spent her career teaching children that they mattered, I finally understood what she'd been trying to tell me. I wasn't the family disappointment. I was exactly who I was supposed to be, and that was more than enough. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.